Welcome back, WNST. I got the beautiful flowers out here. You can order them online, one click, ship them officially licensed anywhere in the United States for any team. Go to sporticulture.com. They're grown right on the west side of town. My man Court's out there awaiting your click and your order, and they do smell lovely, I must admit. Sporticulture.com. Also brought to you by Charles Newsonoff and Sons. Since 1923, true love comes in all shapes and sizes, and there's something for everybody's budget at Charles Newsonoff and Sons. They also buy gold over there. Go see them, Perry Parkway at 695 at charlesnewsonoff.com. They say, let's grow old together. I'm growing old with this guy. He is our professor of all things sports business and one-time leader of your Baltimore Orioles back when they were your Baltimore Orioles on 33rd Street. He is currently a professor of all things sports business at Georgetown University and travels the world, trying to make the world a smarter and better place for the business of sports. And Marty Conway joins us. You can, of course, follow him out on Twitter and LinkedIn. He doesn't blog enough, but when he does, I read it. And we're getting to the end of the line here, Marty. They're what do they say? They're shutting down the super slide. The kids are back in school, as Jimmy Buffett would sing. Baseball's over this week, and now the Orioles go into that other season that I don't know that the fans talk that much about it, but it's their job to make the fans notice what's going on and to be relevant in an offseason where they're going to lose 118 games for the first time in their history. This is a hell of a mess here, Marty, and I think I've said this to you before. Even if these kids knew what they were doing, even if they could employ people like you who know what they're doing, it's still, if everything went right, it would still take a lot to go right to fix this, because this is a mess of really like a biblical proportion. It's a bigger mess than you even had during the Eli Jacobs era and all of that, because I don't know where the money's coming from on the other side. There's no Camden Yards coming to save this place. There's no legend of Cal Ripken or Eddie Murray or Brooks Robinson. They're going to have to do this sort of the old-fashioned way. They're going to have to like rebuild this thing from a stump, literally, right?
Yeah, well, there's two periods that I would point to. Number one, 1988, when I was there and we lost 21 straight, and we ended up losing 107 games. We had the fortune, right, of the following year of getting down to game 87 in Toronto with a chance to actually make the playoffs, and it didn't happen. So there was an incredible rebound from, losing 107 games to winning almost 90 games, which actually re-energized the fan base, re-energized the franchise like you couldn't believe. I don't think that you can expect that. I don't think that you can count on a team, moving back to at 500 or above after losing, more than 107 games. So that's number one. Number two, then I look at the 2014 season when they went to the ALCS against Kansas City. That was the high water mark in terms of attendance. They had around 2.4, almost 2.5 million. And just in that 4 years, they have lost about 1 million tickets sold. They've just vaporized, evaporated, whatever you want to call it. I think that's the period that they have to be concerned about the most. So much in Baltimore, so much in baseball, so much in sort of the leisure entertainment world has changed that I think that's the period you're concerned about. You've had the well-documented Freddie Gray issues in Baltimore. You've had concerns about safety. You've had all sorts of issues. And as a result, that's 1 million tickets lost just in the 4 years. And you can't underestimate how much impact that has on the organization. You're talking about 25, maybe more than $25 million just from that sort of change. And I think it's going to be difficult for the team to sustain its current operating footprint when you don't have that, when you just don't have that much money to rely on anymore. And we know that television isn't coming to the rescue with a lot more money. And I know that you and I've talked about your concerns about baseball in Baltimore, changing. But remember, they're also coming up on the 25th year of the being in Camden Yards. There's a 30-year lease. So there's a lot of issues out there I think that they're going to have to confront. And like you said, I think instead of going back to the basics, I think they're going to have to go forward. They're going to have to innovate. They're going to have to innovate in ways that you purchase a ticket, how you use a ticket, what you can do with a ticket, and all of that, because I think that's the nature of what they're facing is a changing landscape in consumers. And I think they'll probably take a step back, meaning less than 1.5 million in the future. before they can actually take a step forward. But they've got to get to the point where more than 2 million, 2.5 million people are buying tickets just for the financial stability of the franchise.
Well, I mean, it's a baseball issue, right? I mean, the whole thing's piling up. They're awful. Their reputation is awful. Their brand is awful. They're awful on the field. They're awful at communicating. They've pilfered all of this money, that's now in their pockets that was supposed to, well, they were going to store that up, and when it came time to win, they were going to spend it. That's now all gone. The notion that 35 years ago you had Washington, that's now all gone for them. Then there's Freddie Gray, and Camden Yards isn't new, and the price of poker, and the fact that baseball, the sport itself, given to all the things we're talking about, the variety of life and the many ways you could spend disposable income. But I really think the sabermetrics thing and the moving players around and the strikeout, home run, power pitcher and all baseball is not as interesting to me. And I've loved I turn 50 next month. I've loved it my whole life. My last name's Aparicio. I'm coming to terms with the fact that I don't know that I like this version of baseball much more than I like flag football, right? Or Clay Matthews getting a flag for hitting the quarterback the wrong way when I don't even know what the hell the right way is at this point. I think there comes a point where you say, is the game better than it used to be? Hockey's a better game than it used to be. Basketball's not for me. The NBA's not a better game. I don't think baseball's a better game. I don't think men's tennis with aces and power rackets, I don't think it's a better game. So there are games that come along. Baseball has changed dramatically for someone our age in just watching it and how the pace of it moves along and why we would want to go spend 4 hours at a baseball game.
Well, what hurts you from a business standpoint is when you have struggles like this, and I think the Orioles are experiencing an extreme struggle. I don't think this is just your normal everyday, we have a losing season, we're below 500. I think they're in extreme conditions at the moment. Where that hurts you most is in frequency, attendance frequency. So just as you said, and it's been proven here if you look at the numbers in Baltimore over the last 10 years, baseball fans don't go away. They don't all die off or whatever it is. But when you have these kind of conditions, it's the frequency of attendance that really hurts you. And the first place that it hurts you is in the purchase of long-term tickets, season tickets, whatever you want to call them, because that's a high-frequency purchase, right? I intend to either go a number of times, my company's going to use them, whatever it is. When people pull back from that, when they pull back from the high-frequency aspect of it, whether it's an individual or small group or small company or large company, that's where it starts, and that's where it's really hard to overcome. And so when things turn around, you see the frequency come back. Well, like I said, the fact that somebody that used to go 3 to 5 times or 7 times only goes once or twice, you're talking about hundreds of dollars per day, per visit that those people don't show up. And as a result of that, like I said, that's money that you don't get back. You don't really replace those with other people. There's not those other fans that you can stimulate to do that. So as I said, I think ultimately what they have to look to is ways to sort of innovate the way that you experience baseball in Baltimore. And all they have to do is really look down the road at the Washington Nationals, the way they've done a digital ticketing program, your ability to sit at home and say, it's 5 o'clock, I'm not going tonight, I'm immediately going to put my tickets on the secondary market and see if I can get something. Or it's 12 o'clock and I can't go, and now I'm going to get 2 of my friends to go, and I'm going to digitally transfer those tickets to them to make sure that there's people sitting in the seats. Because even though they announced an attendance of 1.5 million, we all know that the actual number that was probably in the ballpark going through the turnstiles this year was probably 200,000 to 300,000 less than that ultimately. And again, when you start talking about per capitas, food and beverage, parking, the other things that go with it, that's where you take an enormous hit that, frankly, there just isn't enough new revenue, new TV money, anything like that to offset that. So I think that's what makes it difficult and prevents them from signing a manager that's going to make $4 million, or prevents them from signing an Adam Jones who might make 10, 12, 15 million, whatever it is. I think all of those things are off the table going forward, and you're looking at an Oakland A's experience here with 60 to 70 to 75 million in payroll, and that's just a roll of the dice. That's just a complete roll of the dice next year. But to your other point, the last point, and that is, baseball has changed. What you see is the new method here, and the Atlanta Braves are the new and latest example of it, is get as bad as you can, lose well more than 100 games, as they did in 2015, and your hope and expectation is that in 3 years you can be close to 90 games and win a division. The Astros did it. The Atlanta Braves did it. The Washington Nationals did it. You hope that in the course of that you get at least one, maybe even two top 3 picks in the draft, and that as a result of that you hit on those keystones, and that's what propels your organization in the future. It's a huge gambit. It's a huge bet, but that is clearly what's happening, and so you're seeing a lot of bad baseball teams, and I think this year there's 5 or more teams that lost more than 100 games. You're seeing a lot of bad baseball teams make their way around baseball, come into stadiums where people just don't care to see them. You know, I mean, I think that's the reality right now.
Marty Conway is our guest. You can, of course, follow him out on Twitter at Marty Conway, the good sports professor from Georgetown University and longtime executive with the Baltimore Orioles. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by the Lee Tessier team, Baltimore's premier realty team, and the folks that I trust with my real estate transactions. With over 50 years of experience helping local buyers and sellers just like you, and Tim helping me, locating the finest properties and also negotiating great deals. Good folks over at LeeTessier.com. Make sure you're checking them out if you're in the market to buy or sell your home. Also, Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast. The tasty coffee, now $1 that Justin Tucker is singing about. When I get my voice back, I'm going to do some Royal Farms singing. I'm going to do a little opera before the month is over, but that's probably going to happen on a Sunday night. Royal Farms, real fresh, real fast, and the Rofo Rewards Card. When you're pumping your gas, you'll get your fried chicken and your Western fries free. Also brought to you by Cole Roofing. I've got the charity and community series here. We do it every Thursday. We're full up this week. We've got a lot of good stories in town. If you have one of those stories, email me, nasty@WNST.net. We'd love to spotlight it for you here on the radio and tell you more about the flip-flop festivities and the cancer situations and leukemia organizations and local community organizations to help the homeless. You can do that by emailing me, nasty@WNST.net. It is all brought to you by Cole Roofing and Pfister Energy. And Billy Cole will be here later in the week. Marty, you mentioned transferring tickets, and I want to get back to baseball, but I'm a Ravens PSL owner. I have not been able to give my tickets away the first 2 games. They're on my phone. It's been raining. I'm like, anybody wants them, let me know. It is so easy to forward those tickets. I mean, I send them to my wife because they're in my account. My wife needs it on her phone. You know, once you dive in, it's kind of like using a smartphone or using a remote control or learning how to work a VCR back in 1979 or learning how to use this newfangled computer. Once you sort of sign up, you can figure it out. But the app ticket thing is great. Other than, and this is true, I was at Lenny Kravitz on Monday night down at the Anthem, and I didn't bring my phone charger, and my phone ran out of battery. Not before I went in, but soon thereafter. It just died on me. The dying phone thing, and I often think, like, what's going to happen when the Russians pull the cord on the grid here in general? Because that's going to happen, and it's going to happen when it's really cold out. It's the first time I've admitted that publicly, but it's going to happen. And when they do that, then how does the world function when the grid gets pulled or the Wi-Fi's not? That's the cluster that they're going to have with 60,000 fans in a stadium when the electricity's not working and the Wi-Fi's not working. And that is a little scary, right?
Yeah, and it's already happened last year at the College Football Championship in Atlanta when President Trump decided to show up, the day before, and they had to put magnetometers, 100 yards outside the stadium. You had people queuing up for 2 or 3 hours now getting into the football game. Well, the only place that people wait 2 or 3 hours and are happy about is when they're waiting for their new iPhone. And in this case, they waited 2 hours, their batteries ran down, and by the time they did get, like your experience, they did get to the front of the line, their battery was dead. So you have to have you have to have an army of customer service people. It happens in Washington where you have quote unquote ticket specialists. But yeah, no, it's a real issue. And I think that the only alternative then is people have to go back in and they get handled. It's almost like the airline situation. You get handled on a one-to-one customer service basis. But and I've said this before, going all in on digital in this regard has enormous upside and enormous advantages, but it has a whole new set of challenges that people haven't experienced before, and they really don't know how to tell, except to have, extra phone chargers and extra cell towers and all these sorts of things to allow for a 100%, digital ticketing environment. And I've seen organizations and helped organizations go through this where they don't want to have, not only do they not want to have paper cardboard tickets, they don't want to have printed out tickets, on 8x11 paper from your printer in your house. That's not what they want to deal with. They just want to deal with things on your phone. Now, I think moving forward, there's going to be some iterations from that. I think you're going to have things that are on wristbands. I think you're going to have all sorts of other things that are not even, you'll be able to access whatever you need ticket-wise, not just from your phone, but from some other sources as well. So that's what they're working on. But look, if you want to go all in on digital, that's the issue. And as you said, the first experience, that gating experience is, it's like getting something in your house that's electronic. The first time you're really frustrated, but once somebody shows you or you get it to work, and then you'd say, why did I ever not do this in the first place? So, again, back to Baltimore, they're one of the last teams to not really go all in on this. I think the marketplace is supportive of that at this point, but at some point, as the marketplace, the newer, younger folks ascend into having more dollars in their pocket, they're going to have to go that direction because, like you said, people want that flexibility to drop a ticket to somebody else, charge them for it, have them pay by Venmo, whatever the circumstance is. That's the circular route for ticketing in the future, not for paper tickets in a box that you're getting, a month before the season starts.
You got kids, man. They keep you young, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. I'm just trying to chase them even when they're in their 20s or early 30s, for sure.
For the Orioles, Marty Conway joining us here, of course, longtime executive of the Orioles. I want to go back into the Orioles and do a little bit of a deeper dive. And I know we talked a lot about this back in July when Machado was getting dealt in the All-Star game, and we've let it lie a little bit. It's the last week here. They're going to lose 115, 16, whatever games it's going to be. If they were competent, right, if on Monday Mr. Big buys the team and Mr., I don't know, Steve Ballmer, there's somebody smart from out of town, buys the team, loves baseball, comes in, has a good reputation. What would happen in a real professional environment here? Like, what would smart people do here immediately? I mean, obviously, hiring a competent baseball guy, a competent manager, putting those people out in front, going out into the community, shaking hands, getting to know people. This guy, John Vitaland, apparently has been here 2 months. I haven't heard from him. I wrote him a 15-page note 10 weeks ago, a longer note than anybody else wrote to him because I care more than anybody else, and I haven't heard from him or anybody else. I haven't heard anybody that's even met John Vitaland yet, or that he's been out meeting with executives or talking to anyone. I don't think they have much to sell, but if they were going to do a real reboot here, right, kick Adam Jones out or give him a little bit too much money to stay for 2 years, figuring out who the manager is going to be and what they're. But if someone professional came in, what would it look like if they were to shut the thing down and reopen the curtains in a new way? Would you change the Oriole bird? What would you do if you were buying the team all over again? Because you're one of the, I'm not here to kiss your butt, Marty, but you have more wisdom than most people I know on any of these topics, and you are exactly a guy that if Mr. Big called and said, Marty, here's $1.2 million to come in and be the president of the team, and come on in, you might take it on if you believed in it, right? Or a guy like you, friends of mine, Dennis Manny, and people that have done this for a living, to bring in professionals, then you go sit in a room with a whiteboard and try to actually put the strategy together. It'd be an interesting white paper for guys like you to say, if I brought in the new Eli Jacobs or the new EBW and we were going to do this the right way, how would it be done? Because I keep wondering, even if they did it right, where are these companies giving them $400,000 a year for skyboxes? I mean, that to me feels like the real problem here is that they're selling to people that don't exist in that way. They can get people to buy $20 tickets if the team's good enough, but I think the big picture is Baltimore, the future, the stadium, the franchise, and the money, the corporate part of this. Marty, I grew up in Dundalk taking the bus out hating you for getting corporate people involved in the Orioles because it was a fans team, and we don't like those wine drinkers from D.C. and those Washington Post. That's what kept the team here the last 25 years. Let's be honest, right?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I went through that when I came to Baltimore. It was made very clear to me that even though my job was to go out and generate a lot of the corporate relationships and partnerships and different things like that, that's still the core of what made the Orioles for the decades was the fan support, the local support, the Section 34s, all Wild Bill Hickey, all those kinds of things. They were much, and so
But you literally ate off of that. You ate off of tickets being sold back then. In the modern era, I mean, it's a stage show, apparently, right?
Yeah, the message was made clear to me, and I think it's still today, and that is there's something, you don't mess with the bird. There's certain characteristics and characters that you wouldn't touch that you might do in another city, or you might have a different experience. There's some of those, and I don't think any of those are necessary. But, to your point, there are many people, there are organizations, and they're known for, sort of running into the burning building, if you will, as opposed to going to the San Francisco Giants when they've won 2 straight, or the Golden State Warriors when they've won, championships. But to your point, there's many things to do. Number one, you'd have to prioritize what those are and what you think you can get done. I know you've talked about this before with me and some of your other guests. They do have to get the streaming component done. That's a simple equation to do. That's really just money that has to be transferred. Consumers are not going to end up paying extra for that. If you have a Comcast subscription, you'll be able to see your games on the go. Now, how much is that? Look, the Boston Red Sox are probably the top in that regard this year. They've had a streaming operation with Nestor, and at their peak this year, they had 15,000 people watching on a stream. That seems like a lot, but in the scheme of things, it might not be. But as I said, I think it's 2 things. Number one, it's revolutionized the way that people touch the franchise and buy tickets, as I said earlier in this interview, buy tickets, touch things, do that. And then number 2, I think they have to completely rebuild their partnerships and relationships in the marketplace. And I think they have to look differently at what a partnership and sponsorship is at this point, because they've been giving away head-to-toe clothes. It's like you could have 10 mannequins full of Orioles gear over the last 2 years.
And some garden gnomes. Don't forget them, too. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And many of it's not sponsored. They're giving this away. Like, what is the overall approach on that? So that, like I said, there's probably a list of 50 things that you would sit down and start with, and you would have to come up with your list of, as Steve Jobs would say, no, just give me the 10. Give me the 10 that you think you can get done. And that's a combination of the ballpark experience, which I think is adequate and people are very fan-friendly, but I think it's the modernization of how people interact with the franchise. And unfortunately, I don't think there's been any emphasis on doing that. And I think all of that is the fact that, Peter Angelos, having run the franchise and now being in his late 80s and insisting that he approve all of these type things, has led to the fact that none of them have gotten done. They might have gotten white papered, or they might have gotten on a whiteboard, but none of them were able to get done. And yeah, they did. They have hired a senior business person. Now look, the announcement was made on July the 3rd, and they released it at 12:15 in the afternoon. They closed the office at 12 on July 3rd. They were closed on July 4th for the 4th of July holiday. That's the last you've heard of the fact that they've hired a senior business executive. So, I don't know what that means necessarily. I just look at it from the perspective of, well, if that's the last time we heard the fact that they made the change and you haven't heard of the person since then, that's a pretty good indication that maybe they weren't as serious about it as they might have told other people that they were going to be. But
yeah, John Fiedelin is so dynamic. How does it? Nobody I know met him yet. That's what I mean. If you're going to make a splash, make a splash. Yeah. Come in here and run the place. You know what I mean?
Well, and as I said, in fairness to him, he's been around Major League industry. I don't know him personally. I know some other people that have worked with him. He seems to be certainly competent to be able to do this. But the question is, how much authority, how much autonomy is he going to get? Now, again, maybe when the season's over, they'll begin to make some wholesale changes, not just on the baseball side, but there'll be some other restructurings and different things around business. That could be the case. But I think understanding that the Baltimore market is different now, as I said, than it was prior to 2014 for a lot of reasons. A lot of people have genuine fear, angst about coming down to the ballpark, or feel like it's a safety situation, or don't want to take their kids. But most importantly, it's become a situation where people don't feel like they have to come as frequently, and they still feel like they're have a piece of the Orioles, in their minds, and they're comfortable with that. And this is a market, much like Kansas City, much like Milwaukee and other places, where you have to drive frequency as opposed to just hitting the market once. I can go to New York and Los Angeles, and I can hit people to come once or twice, and I can draw 3 million. Here, you're not going to draw 2.5 million unless you're getting people to move that frequency from 2 to 5 or 5 to 8 or 10 to 15 in terms of their attendance.
Marty Conway is the sports professor at Georgetown University, and he's our sports professor around here from time to time as well. Last thing for you, and you can drop the mic on this if you want. Ken Rosenthal wrote a piece at The Athletic a couple weeks ago that basically said Major League Baseball doesn't know who's running the franchise. It's pretty scary, dude, right? I mean, literally, they don't even know who to pick the phone up and call down here. And I remember about 5 years ago when my press pass was gone for like 9 years at the time, I had an executive on the steps of the Sheraton on Park Avenue in New York City before the Mets All-Star game in the summer of 2013 say to me, Nestor, we don't get any further with those people than you do. And I'm thinking they don't even return Major League Baseball's phone calls. Dude, I don't know what to say when Major League Baseball is saying that to the most decorated baseball writer in the country, to put that out there, that we don't even know who's running the team, and yet they're in our charter.
No, it is stunning in this regard because having that experience to know I was involved in Major League Baseball even prior to the Orioles. I've been around circumstances where the owner of the Red Sox has passed away or nearly passed away, and his wife was running it, or she abdicated the responsibility to a family member or somebody else in the organization to run it. So very typically, and clear, Major League Baseball clearly exists now. I do know just from being around a little bit that Lou Angelos had been designated as an owner's representative, and this is even when 4, 5, or 6 years ago when Mr. Angelos was much more available to be around. I never saw John in that capacity, but I did see Lou specifically. And so if something has changed there, but it's very clear that I think by next season, Major League Baseball is going to insist on that. And there's going to be some things that are coming up. The Masson dispute is probably going to be back to the tribunal in November if it goes back, if there's not a negotiated settlement. And so someone from the club is going to have to be in that designated chair in November at the latest. And then you've got ownership meetings that are in November and December. And so someone is going to have to be in that chair, whether they're appointed or whether through some other kind of circumstance. But yeah, that's what concerns Major League Baseball the most, is when they have long-standing franchises in Boston and Detroit where they've had these issues to change. It recently happened in the NBA where Rich DeVos passed away at 92 years old. He'd been nearly incapable of running the franchise, I was told by friends, for 3 years. And so it does happen in circumstances where there's an aging owner, and it can hurt and cripple the franchise. But eventually it has to get resolved.
Well, we just saw the Broncos come through here, right? I mean, Pat Bowlen, we were talking about him. I mean, the NFL doesn't say we don't know who's running the Broncos. I mean, it's $1 billion franchise, right? I mean, that's the really bizarre. I mean, and it keeps getting more bizarre. It's been bizarre for 25 years, Marty. You know, literally, you've watched this, I've watched this. You call it unorthodox. I call it bizarre. But it's kind of like the government right now. I don't know where the end of this is. I mean, I need popcorn for this with the Orioles for the ending. People always ask me, what are you going to say when Peter Angelos dies? I said, probably nothing that I haven't already said while he's alive. I don't know how to portray this, but I do know I'm here and I have to talk about the Orioles, and I don't know that they are a format or an industry or a civic concern of any kind over the next 2 or 3 years here from a conversation standpoint. I certainly go nowhere where people are conversing about them in any way like I'm interested in buying tickets or getting involved again.
Yeah, like I said, that's what was on when I mentioned one of my top 2 or top 3 circumstances is you'd have to be out in the community actively and repeatedly generating those kind of conversations that have happened in the past, whether you had a designated hitter club, you had all kinds of organizations connected to the team that have been able to do that, and that's the history and the heritage of this market. You can't take tactics that were in Miami or Los Angeles or Chicago and necessarily bring them to Baltimore. It's a very unique market, but I do think there's areas where they're clearly going to have to modernize the way that they do it and be more aggressive in enough ways so that they can stabilize these base areas of the franchise. Because yes, we've talked about suites having a difficult time. The market has changed for those almost 180 degrees from where it was. when they open the ballpark. And so it's a combination of renovation, innovation, and along the way. And yes, if baseball is sending a message through that article with Ken Rosenthal, because if people involved in Major League Baseball are mentioning that to Ken Rosenthal, they want that message to get out, and particularly to Baltimore, that they need something to happen, and maybe they are going to give it a certain amount of time more, have patience before they step in and say, okay, we need this. This must happen now. And that's probably something that you look for this offseason, is for some more formal change of representation or whatever it is. And again, I think I'd look at November for the Masson hearing, if that does go forward, as an indication of what's going to be like in the future.
Yeah, I forgot about the legal entanglements. We're 30 minutes into this. I haven't even talked about the couple $100 million in dispute. My man, we'll do a Springsteen show. No baseball for you and me the next 6 months. Moratorium on you and I going to baseball games until April.
Hey, the man is 69 now. Who knows how much longer he's going to be around? We have to do that, don't we?
Bruce. All right, man. We'll see you soon, Marty.
Okay, buddy.
Marty Conway, our sports professor of all things business down at Georgetown University. Follow him out on LinkedIn and on Twitter. You can find me out in the Bay at Toyota.com audio vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere you are. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.